Close your eyes slowly. Let the modern world drift away like fog retreating from the edge of an old lake. Let the hum of machines, the glow of screens, and the worries of today slowly dissolve, vanishing like footprints on the first snow. Take a long breath, and now let us walk slowly backward, step by step across the centuries, to a time when the night was truly dark and time ticked slowly like drops of water falling from a stone ceiling. Imagine you are in a damp wooden room. There is no electricity, no clocks, only the sound of fire crackling in the hearth and the whisper of wind slipping through the cracks in the window. Then you hear footsteps on the creaking stairs, slow, measured, as if someone is climbing time itself to meet something that should have stayed buried. You have now arrived at a place not mentioned in history books, not because it lacked importance, but because those who knew of it chose silence. We are about to follow the trail of a small object that never disappears, a ring of dark silver nearly weightless to the touch, yet heavier in story than the ruins of forgotten churches. This is not a tale of heroism, not a love story. It is merely a quiet observation of how one object can erode the soul, biting gently at the edges of sanity, hiding behind reasons that sound far too reasonable. This is the story of how logic can lie, and how something that was never alive can still endure. Imagine it is the year 1312. Autumn has come too early in the region now known as Lorraine, a forested plateau between what is today northeastern France and western Germany. The fog does not only visit in the mornings, but lingers through the afternoons, as if the sky has forgotten how to open. On the edge of a small village called Vitricot, a place not even marked on the royal maps, lies the ruins of an old monastery. Half sunk into the earth, its walls embraced by moss, its wooden cross atop the tower leaning as though about to fall. No one lives there anymore. The monks had long since vanished. Some say they left because the well water changed taste, and on some nights the bell rang by itself, though no hand had touched the rope. But not all of their relics were lost. It was among these ruins that a soil digger named Lucien found the ring. He wasn't searching for it. He was merely trying to collect old stones to sell to a mason. The ring was wedged deep within a crack in the stone, as if it had been purposefully placed. Lucien said that when he touched it, the air around him turned colder, and for a moment, all sound disappeared. He brought it home without much thought. His wife called it strange but beautiful, and placed it inside a small wooden box alongside other forgotten trinkets. But after that, their home never felt whole again. Lucien, once a quiet and honest man, began speaking in his sleep. He started scribbling numbers no one could explain, drawing symbols behind doors and locking the cellar without reason. And one day, he vanished, leaving only a blank sheet of paper and the faint scent of metal in the air. No one searched for him for long, because everyone knew he'd brought home something that wasn't his. The ring was found again on the dining table, clean, still gleaming. And from that day forward, the object always returned, from one hand to another, as if it did not wish to be possessed, only to be found, over and over. After Lucien, the ring was never gone for long. An old woman who tended to the ruins of the monastery claimed to have found it lying atop the altar stone, even though the place had been locked for years. She brought it home and wore it on her ring finger, saying it felt warm despite the frozen weather. 3 weeks later, her neighbor found her seated by the window. Eyes open but unblinking, her hand clutching the handle of a door that had never opened. No wound, no blood, no explanation. But the ring was gone. Then it appeared again around the neck of a stillborn calf, hanging like a charm. The calf's owner, a gruff farmer named Corbin, kept it. Within 3 days, his family's well ran dry, and their dogs refused to approach the house. He tried to throw the ring into the river, but the water spat it back onto the bank by morning. His wife found it inside the breadbasket. She said nothing. She simply took it and buried it deep in the wheat field, hoping the earth might devour it. But in the next season, the crops growing above that spot rose twice as tall as the rest, and the birds stopped singing nearby. Something remained not just in the ring, but in the ground it had touched, as if every place that held it preserved an echo of the last soul who had, and the ring kept moving. From drawer to box, from pocket to chest, from palm to palm of those who unknowingly lifted it from the dirt. None remembered placing it where it was found, but all claimed they had only stumbled upon it, and somehow could not let it go. It is not known who carried it out of the village, but the ring reappeared in the market square of Loudon. Sold by a traveler who could not recall where he had found it. He offered it to an old goldsmith who refused to buy it, claiming the metal felt wrong too heavy for its size and bore scorch marks along the inner band that defied explanation. But a candlemaker bought it because it was cheap and oddly shaped. He wore it for 2 days. On the third, his workshop caught fire, though not from neglect. All wicks had been intact, all oil tightly sealed. There were no screams, only a strange scent, like incense from some forgotten monastery. When the fire died, everything was ash, except a small metal bowl where the ring had been left. Soon after, a cold delivery boy found it by the roadside and pocketed it, mistaking it for a coin. He never returned home. A woodcutter spotted him days later, sitting still in the middle of a wheat field. Eyes open, face neither afraid nor peaceful, just empty. Beside him, a dead bird, its beak open as if it had once tried to sing. The ring was still in the boy's hand. Afterward, a young monk brought it into the church, locked it in an iron box, and prayed for 3 days. On the 4th, he was found in a kneeling position, not breathing but not dead. His body remained warm for weeks, unspoiled. No one dared touch him. The iron box where the ring had been stayed sealed. Until one stormy night, when thunder shook the city and the box was found open again. The ring was gone. No one admitted seeing who had taken it, but one thing became certain: whatever it was, the thing did not want to be left behind. And the city was too busy to ask why. One by one, those who touched it began to change. Long after the city of Loudon had lost all trace of the ring, its image began to appear in places where it did not belong. A painter of altarpieces in 1314, known only as Frater Amalricus, depicted the hand of the Virgin Mary wearing an iron ring with spiraling engravings. No record showed that the painting was ever altered, and none of the other monks remembered him adding such a detail. In his will, he wrote that he had never seen the ring but that his hand moved on its own. In the western region of Brittany, a woodcarver left behind a statue of an angel, its fingers clenched around a metal ring, inconsistent with the iconography of the time. When asked, he simply said that nightmares had driven him to carve it that way and that he felt something would destroy his workshop if he didn't complete it. In manuscripts copied by monks in Rhine and Hesse, a recurring symbol appeared circles within circles, wrapped in jagged lines with margin notes, calling it the mark of presence or the sleeping eye. No instruction explained why it had to be included. Even in liturgy, within the margins of a 14th century Vulgate copy, a faint sketch of a hand-thin fingers grasping something round, yet unlit appeared. None of the scribes claimed to have drawn it, and when questioned by the bishop, they swore on Christ that the page had been blank the last time they checked. Over time, scholars realized that the rings form its size. The curve of its metal, even the faint scratches along its outer edge, remained consistent, even though the depictions came from unconnected places, times, and contexts. As if it were a memory no one had lived through, yet left so deep that the world could only replicate it, not understand it. No official document records the ring's removal from Loudon, nor who took it. Yet for over 2 centuries, the genealogies of European noble families show a strange pattern. The presence of an inherited item, never explicitly named, yet always passed down from one generation to the next, often coinciding with sudden deaths or quiet exiles. Among the letters of the von Hollenberg family in Austria, a note reads, "The third grandson must receive the burden that cannot be described, kept in a black wooden box and never opened on a rainy night." Its contents are never detailed. In southern France, the Moroni family kept a small silver case sealed with red wax, only to be opened by a family member who dreamed of a voice in an empty room and breathing walls. They called it Le Mute, the mute witness. In Italy, the Orsini family once burned their entire cellar because something pulsed behind the metal, according to the diary of their youngest son, who disappeared within a week. The ring, it seems, was never requested, yet it always found its way to hidden, dark, secret-filled places. None of its holders ever claimed to own it, but no one denied it when accused of keeping it. When the object eventually surfaced again, its inheritors always spoke with the same tone that they did not know when it first arrived. But it had always been there, silent, closed, waiting. In the year 1511, in a small town called Colmar, a clockmaker named Guillaume Zorn received a black box from a mysterious customer, an unfamiliar man who spoke in a form of Latin no longer used, and left the box without a name. Guillaume, used to dismantling timepieces and writing poetry about gear movement, assumed it was just another antique. But that night, as he opened the box and found a black ring etched with patterns like roots sinking inward, something happened. His workshop fell into an unnatural silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of time itself. The oil in his clock bottle thickened. The candles ceased to flicker. The crickets stopped. Guillaume tried placing the ring atop his magnetic disc to measure its metallic rhythm, but the needle spun endlessly to the left. In his notebook, he wrote, This ring does not live in our time. It exists between seconds within the silence between two sounds. The longer he observed it, the stronger the sensation that it was observing him in return. He stopped sleeping. He heard ticking not from his clocks, but from beneath the floor. 3 weeks later, he burned all his notes and buried the ring beneath the city's clock tower. Strangely, the next morning, the town clock of Colmar, normally accurate to the minute, began showing the same time repeatedly, always at 2:13. No one could fix it. To this day, the clock still ticks. But it never moves forward. In 1765, at the height of the Enlightenment era, a surgeon and scientist named Dr. Alaric von Metzger discovered the ring beneath the floorboards of his former operating room, a stone-walled chamber on the outskirts of Salzburg. Once a monastery, now an experimental clinic. He didn't know how the ring got there, only that it felt warm to the touch, despite having just been dug from cold earth. Alaric, a man obsessed with dissecting everything through microscope and scalpel, placed the ring on the autopsy table and attempted to slice it with a silver blade. The metal resisted every cut. He heated it, cooled it, soaked it in acid, but its surface remained untouched, cleaner even than before. Then he tried a technique he used for living tissue, a circular incision along the edge, and something opened. It wasn't metal. Inside the ring was a layer resembling capillary networks, pulsing slowly, like blood vessels cut open, yet without bleeding. When he shone light into it, the internal structure shrank like a pupil reacting to brightness. He recorded the discovery in his medical journal, calling it non-mammalian tissue, unregistered in any biological catalog. But that night, he awoke to a soft, rhythmic sound like a heartbeat, not from his chest, but from the drawer where he stored the ring. 3 days later, all his lab animals died simultaneously. The walls of his chamber grew warm. A circular pattern of fungal growth appeared on the stone. When his colleagues came to see him, they found him talking alone, as if trying to reassure someone. "I just want to know how you beat without a heart." He was committed to an asylum, and his notes vanished. But the room where the ring was found remains sealed to this day. In the winter of 1843, a noted occultist named Etienne Vericourt, famous for collecting cursed relics from ancient eras, acquired the ring from a black market dealer in Praga. Trading a vial of pure mercury and a preserved human finger, a court assumed it was just another failed artifact, claimed to be from some lost civilization, but really nothing more than rusted jewelry. But the moment he touched it, something shifted in his mind. His dreams lengthened, turning into endless corridors of stone where bodiless voices whispered in languages he had never heard, yet somehow understood. He locked himself in his study, carving a summoning circle into the stone floor with his own fingernails. He lit candles made of human fat and mixed rabbit's blood with antique wine. His journal from that night described the voice within the ring as not a voice, but a memory that demanded to be relived, an echo of a thought that refused to die. "It does not want to be explained," he wrote. "It wants to be remembered." Each night he tried to speak to it not with words, but through dreams. He slept, clutching the ring tightly, and by morning, he would awaken with strange cuts along his arms, marks he never made himself. On the 14th night, every mirror in the house shattered, and all clocks stopped at 3:12 a.m. Vericourt wrote one final sentence before vanishing. If you speak its name correctly, it will open its eyes. No one knows what that name is. But to this day, his house still stands on Rue de l'Epine, and neighbors swear that on nights of the full moon, the window to his room glows faintly, and breathing can be heard inside, though no one lives there. In the early 20th century, Le Ring resurfaced in a faded portrait of a French nobleman named Duc-Adrien de Varcelles, a man who, according to old newspapers, had attended over 6 different royal coronation ceremonies. Not a single servant in his estate knew his true age, or even where he came from. He lived in an ancient chateau in the Dordogne region, where grand paintings depicted him at an unchanging age since 1874. Every painter he hired reported the same strange feeling. They had painted that face before, in another place, another time, but couldn't recall where. Slowly, they would forget who had summoned them at all. One detail always remained in those portraits: a ring on his left hand, shaped like an open wound, colored like dried blood. Rumors said he never fell ill. Each time a flu swept across Europe, his castle remained untouched. No deaths, no births. But the most disturbing thing about his longevity was the silence that accompanied it. With every year he gained, one person who had known him would vanish from the memories of others. Long-serving maids, childhood friends, even cousins who had once stayed in his guest rooms, still alive, but entirely forgotten by the world. In the village nearby, children would sometimes cry at night, calling for someone no one knew. The city archives list the name of Duc-Adrien only until 1931. After that, all official records seemed to ignore him, though he was still seen sitting on his castle balcony, watching a world that grew stranger with each passing year. When he finally vanished, only one maid remained, an old woman who couldn't recall why she lived there or who she served. Still, she cleaned the chamber every morning, whispering with empty eyes, there is something that refuses to leave. Something that doesn't want to be forgotten, but doesn't want to be remembered either. There is no official record of the day the ring was imprisoned, but its echo remains in a nameless chamber buried deep beneath an old monastery in the Rhine region. The passage leading to it is sealed behind 5 layers of iron doors, each without keyholes and without handles. Those who knew how to open them have long dead, and they died willingly. Upon the outer wall of the crypt, strange markings are etched, not letters, not numbers, but gouges resembling claw marks on molten steel. No one knows how the chamber was built, no architect, no blueprint. Even the monks now tending the ruined monastery claim no knowledge of such a space, though the staircase to it begins behind the main altar. Anyone descending feels the change by the 3rd step. The smell of wet soil and scorched metal seeps upward. Candlelight flickers erratically. The air thickens, as if time itself refuses to flow in that place. According to the last surviving oral tale, the ring wasn't placed in a box, was embedded within a lump of molten glass formed from sand and blood. The monks who sealed the chamber did not speak God's name, did not read scripture, did not wear robes. They stood in silence, each slicing out their own tongues before leaving, so none could ever describe what they had seen. And yet, the duty of guarding it was passed down through generations. Tragically, the words once whispered became lullabies, then mere sounds, then nothing. In 1972, a village boy playing near the old altar stumbled upon the hidden stairway. He descended just 4 steps before his mother pulled him back. But after that day, the boy began to speak in a language no one had taught him, a tongue that caused hens to lay black eggs and dogs to howl at noon. He wasn't banished, he was forgotten. No one remembered his name. No one remembered his face. Even his mother, the woman who had saved him, began referring to herself as a woman without children. And the crypt remained sealed, guarded by something even stone could no longer remember. Her name was Camille Fournier. She wasn't cursed nor chosen. She came from no ancient bloodline. It's just a young archaeologist from Lyon, tired of Roman ruins and eager to discover something unmapped. During a geological survey in 1996, she and her team detected a magnetic anomaly beneath the foundations of a nearly forgotten monastery. The monastery had been abandoned since the 1950s. Following a series of incidents never documented publicly, there was no electricity, no priestly records, no cross on the wall. Camille, then 27, took it on as her private project. On the 7th day of excavation, they unearthed a layer of tiles that matched no known era. While brushing dust from one particularly large slab beneath the altar, part of the floor gave way, revealing a narrow shaft and steep stone stairs descending into darkness. She didn't wait for the team. She went down alone. 1 step, 2, 3, and the world shifted. Her flashlight began to throb like a frightened pulse. The walls weren't stone, but mirrored surfaces like molten black glass. No dust, no scent of soil. Only a cold that came not from the earth, but from the absence of life itself. Below, she found a single iron door marked with strange incisions, not writing, but patterns that seemed to move if stared at too long. She touched one line. The door opened silently, as if pleased to be noticed again. No hinges, no lock. Inside the chamber, on a white stone pedestal, lay the ring. It looked small. It looked dead. But Camille felt it beating not in her ears, but inside her bones. She didn't touch it. But from that moment on, no one ever truly saw Camille again. The last trace of her was a 30-second video from the camera she carried, showing a circular room with a ceiling too tall for anything built underground. In the final second, before the footage dissolved into black, Camille whispered in a voice not quite her own, "This is not a discovery. It is waking." Camille's recording wasn't found right away. It was tucked into a decaying leather bag, retrieved from the dig site 2 weeks after she vanished. Researchers assumed it was just routine footage until they played the video in the archive room of a small museum in Rennes. 5 people watched it. All 5 reported strange experiences. One said her hands went numb. Another felt the ceiling curve overhead. A third swore she heard a pulsing beat from beneath the floor. They laughed it off, blamed fatigue, poor video quality. But 2 days later, 3 of them returned to the monastery site, unannounced, unauthorized. They entered the basement area, which had already been sealed off with iron fencing. One jumped into the pit. They brought no camera, left no notes, never returned. So, the footage was sealed, relocated to Paris, stored in the labs of the d'Estoile, accessible only under special permit. But the video still worked. Not through images, but patterns, not sound, but rhythm. Those who stared too long began dreaming of stone circles, of voices under the soil, a ring that asked not to be touched, only observed. One intern from Belgium tried to recreate the symbols etched on the iron door. He scratched them onto the wall of the lab sublevel. After that, he stopped speaking. He stopped eating. He stood facing the wall, tracing circles in the air with his right hand, endlessly redrawing a pattern that never finished. He became the first of many. Not all vanished in body, but few truly returned from that one too long look into the screen. The video had no horror, no blood, no scream. But for the weak, the room called, softly, slowly, like a whisper from inside their own minds. It didn't happen through scandal, not through conspiracy. It began with a clerical mistake. Someone at the d'Estoile transferred the recording to a digital archive for internal audit. But the file meant to be encrypted and hidden was mistakenly included in the media library for a collaborative exhibition with the Rotterdam Museum of Archaeology. No one noticed. Among hundreds of videos and 3D renderings, Camille's footage was placed on an interactive monitor in a room-themed symbolism and the transcendent. The screen activated automatically when visitors stood before it. No sound, just images of Camille, walking, entering the stone room, then pausing and looping. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. But those who lingered in front of that screen began to show signs. First, silence. Second, they returned the next day. Third, they began copying symbols on brochures, on their palms, on the museum's restroom walls. Then they stopped coming. In the first month of the exhibition, 31 visitors could no longer be traced. Some may have been tourists, but some left behind backpacks. Some left car keys. One child was found alone in the museum parking lot after dark. His mother was never located. Eventually, the screen was turned off, but not right away. It took 2 weeks and 7 incident reports before the curators suspected something was wrong. The clip was removed, but it was too late. Some visitors had recorded it on their phones, uploaded it to obscure forums, shared it on unlisted channels of underground video platforms. What once breathed only in a stone room in France now lived inside the devices of the curious. Not all understood what they were watching, but some dreamed after viewing it. Some began drawing circles on fogged mirrors. Some stopped speaking, and some began walking. Even if they didn't know where they were headed, their steps brought them somewhere. Somewhere that waits. His name was Henry Vaudin, a retired missing persons investigator from the French gendarmerie. He'd left the force in 2006, but after his wife passed, he began reading small-town news, again with unusual focus. He built his own map on his kitchen wall, pinning clippings from local papers in Lorraine. Valence, even bulletins from churches in Angoulême. Each case seemed random. A middle-aged woman vanished after attending a museum seminar. A teen lost during a school break. An elderly priest who left a cryptic confession letter before disappearing. Henry logged dates, times, and one detail that connected them, all discovered only after his third round of review. Every person had visited the same exhibition within 6 months. A traveling museum, never in big cities, themed around spiritual experiences and marginal rights in European history. Henry called the museum staff. No answer. He mailed a formal inquiry. No reply. So he boarded a train to the exhibit's final stop, Clermont-Ferrand. No one welcomed him. The small museum appeared deserted from outside, though the signage still read open. Henry walked in. Oh, guards. No visitors. Just a single large screen in a dim room. No labels, no context. Only the phrase, Ritual Archives Vivantes. He stood before the screen. 15 seconds. His eyes narrowed. He saw Camille. Didn't recognize the face, but knew instantly this wasn't a typical recording. The motion to slow, the footage to clean, the lighting too. Wrong? He turned, looking for a staff member to question. But the room remained empty. He turned back and stared longer than he meant to. 4 minutes. 7, 12. The map in his kitchen stayed untouched. The clippings stayed pinned. But no new thread was added after that day. Henry Vaudin never returned home. When his younger brother visited the flat the following week, nothing was missing except Henry's coat and notebook. But inside the refrigerator door, one symbol had been carved with the tip of a kitchen knife, a circle with an inverted triangle inside. That mark had never appeared in any of Henry's clippings. But now it appeared in 27 different places across France. On bus stop walls, on the backs of public toilet doors, in the corners of ancient elevator shafts, and no one has claimed to draw them. The next morning, the mist had not fully lifted from the road when a young shepherd found the ring near a hawthorn bush, half buried in the damp soil. He did not know that the old man from the neighboring village had dug a hole and buried the object with trembling hands. He did not know that the night before, that man had heard small footsteps on the thatched roof of his home, though no one was there. The shepherd picked up the ring and felt its chill pierce his skin, even though the sun had already begun to rise. He slipped it into his pocket and continued his work with the flock that always strayed into the valley fog. But that day, one sheep walked into the river and never came back. The next day, 2 more were found dead. Their necks twisted in strange positions as if turned by invisible hands. The shepherd began to talk to stones and trees, and at night he laughed into the mirror of the stream. The villagers believed he was possessed and summoned a priest from the city. But before the priest arrived, the shepherd vanished. The ring was found again in an old well. This time, it was a rope maker who discovered it, and the story began again. We begin to notice a pattern, but no one truly records it. In the 13th century, Manuscript scribes were more concerned with copying sacred texts than documenting the madness of a shepherd boy. After all, who would believe that a ring could move on its own, reappear after being thrown into a river or buried beneath a chapel floor? There are no scrolls listing every name that once owned it. Only whispers passed from village to village, carried across generations in the form of bedtime tales or grim warnings to disobedient children. Some say the ring is a relic of the Fae, while others believe it was forged by human hands long dead, someone who shaped metal not for beauty, but to bind souls. A monk once hastily scribbled in the margin of his book that he saw a traveler speaking to his own shadow, a glinting ring on his finger. But that note was torn out by the abbot, and the monk was locked in his cell in silence for the rest of his days. In the darkness of those stone corridors, the ring's name was only ever spoken in murmurs, never aloud, never in the light. Imagine a young girl, perhaps 18 years old, living in a remote village in the hills of Hungary during a 14th century winter. Her father was a shoemaker, her mother long dead from fever, and her only pastime was daydreaming by the fire while stitching. One day, a traveling merchant arrived, carrying tattered cloth, cracked beads, and trinkets, he claimed, came from Constantinople. Among the piles of fabric, there was a small ring. It looked unremarkable, just dark silver with fine, nearly unreadable engravings. The girl, for reasons she could not explain, was drawn to it. She traded a pair of leather soles she had sewn herself. From that moment, she spoke to no one. She would sit for hours, staring at the wall, sometimes smiling at something unseen. At night, she walked outside without a cloak, whispering names no one recognized. One morning, her father found her sitting motionless by the village well, the ring still on her finger, her eyes empty. Within weeks, she disappeared. Villagers only found the ring left at the church door, glowing faintly atop the frozen stone. Centuries later, in the ruins of a small moss-covered monastery in the region of Transylvania, a group of researchers uncovered a small wooden box hidden behind the collapsed altar wall. Inside, wrapped in fragile linen cloth, was an old silver ring. Its engravings were nearly worn away, but the pattern still showed an endless spiral, like a symbol chasing its own tail. Beside the ring was a yellowed piece of parchment, written in shaky handwriting in poor Latin. The note was not a prayer, nor a poem, but a kind of warning, penned by a monk who claimed to have found the ring at the bottom of a well. He kept it in prayer for 7 days and nights, but soon began hearing voices from behind the stone walls. Children crying, footsteps at midnight, the sound of a demon crawling into his thoughts. The monk wrote that he tried to throw the ring into fire, but the metal would not heat. He immersed it in holy water, but the water turned murky and smelled of blood. Finally, he sealed the ring behind the church wall and recorded in his final line, "If you are reading this, do not touch it." Not even prayer is strong enough to contain it. But humans, as always, possess a curiosity that cannot be silenced by warnings. One of the researchers took the ring to a nearby town, keeping it in the pocket of his coat during the journey. He didn't know that on the first night at the inn, his colleagues were awakened by the sound of him speaking alone in a language they couldn't identify. He muttered with open eyes, staring at the ceiling, and his fingers kept clutching something in the empty air. 2 days later, he was found standing outside an old building, clothes torn and face covered in mud, staring into an empty window as if he saw someone behind it. After being brought back to his country and undergoing evaluation, he had completely lost memory of the trip to Transylvania. He didn't remember the ring, the ruins, or even who he was before that month. But the ring remained on his hand, as if it had never been removed. Attempts to take it off failed. His skin rejected any metal, and even a surgical blade couldn't touch the ring without sparking strangely, as if the metal were alive and defending itself. The news spread slowly, from whispers to small newspapers, then to magazines that hunted strange tales for their mystery-hungry readers. A museum in Germany offered to study the ring, bringing it into a secure laboratory, sealing it in special glass, and surrounding it with electromagnetic sensors. But on the first night it was kept there, one of the security guards disappeared. There were no signs of struggle, only video footage showing the guard staring straight into the glass, then placing his keys on the floor and walking away, toward a solid concrete wall. He walked directly into it and never reappeared. The wall remained intact, the doors stayed shut, and his body was never found. In the morning, the scientists discovered that the surveillance cameras had glitched for 8 minutes, right after the guard vanished. And during those 8 minutes, the temperature in the glass chamber dropped drastically, reaching freezing levels while the surrounding rooms remained normal. They tried to replicate the effect with artificial cooling systems, but it couldn't be repeated. One technician began experiencing sleep disturbances and asked to be reassigned, claiming he heard soft knocking from within the glass every midnight. No official conclusion came from that research. All reports were written in neutral language, filled with technical terms, never mentioning the words curse, madness, or loss of mind. Yet the museum staff stopped referring to the object as an artifact. They called it only it, as if even naming it was too risky. The ring was then moved to the basement, locked inside a welded metal box, with access to the room limited to just 2 people per week under strict supervision. Among janitors and technicians, whispers spread about a recurring dream of a narrow stone corridor of footsteps behind them that were never seen, and of a shadowed figure sitting at the far end of a room, staring from a distance. No one dared report the dream to their supervisors. But when a new technician accidentally mentioned the dream during lunch, 3 others immediately stopped eating and stared at him in silence. No one replied, but from that day on, they no longer spoke to each other when near the basement, as if there was an unwritten silent agreement that the object should never be looked at for too long. Several years later, during renovations of the museum building and the relocation of some collections, an intern accidentally reopened old files about the ring. He was working on a digital archiving project and unknowingly opened a folder that had never been clearly labeled. Inside, he found old photographs, hand-drawn sketches, and handwritten notes seemingly from various curators. All of them spoke of the same object, though in different ways. Some mentioned recurring dreams, others noted increased heart rates near the storage room. and a few wrote that they felt watched testically when viewing the ring through CCTV footage. At first, the intern was not disturbed. He read all the documents with innocent curiosity, unaware he was opening a door that should have stayed shut. Only a week later, he began seeing flashes of silver in his dreams. Always in complete darkness, only one point of light shimmered, as if a small ring was reflecting moonlight despite the absence of sky. Then came whispers, unclear in meaning, but so soft and close it felt like they were coming from inside his own head. He did not report it. There was no rational reason to. But from that day forward, he began avoiding the basement. The following autumn, a special exhibition on unidentified medieval objects opened to the public in the museum's East Wing. In one of the smallest glass cases, the ring was displayed, now labeled with a carefully written yet vague description. It stated that the ring was an unidentified artifact from around the 13th century, featuring engraved patterns not found on any other known European object. No record of its origin existed, and most old catalogs referred to it merely as an unnamed item. Though placed in a corner, visitors often lingered before it. Some children pointed and said they felt cold, even though the air conditioning in that area had been shut off. Others became suddenly dizzy, and security staff noted that near that case, CCTV cameras frequently glitched, flickering, or recording blurry images. No one dared touch the glass, not even cleaning staff, who always cleaned it from a distance. Strangely, each night the ring appeared to shift slightly. Not much, only a quarter turn, but enough for the curators to take note every morning, unable to explain why the case's seal remained intact. As if the object disliked stillness, disliked confinement. It wanted to be noticed, even if it mustn't be touched. It wanted to be remembered, even if it mustn't be named. Nights at the museum became different once the ring was displayed. Night staff, once accustomed to long silences, began reporting faint sounds whispers behind the glass, or soft metallic chimes from nowhere. A janitor quit after claiming that his reflection in the display case shifted into the face of someone else's hooded monk, with the edges of the cowl charred. Day visitors began to report strange dreams the following nights. All sharing a similar pattern, they wandered a cold stone corridor, with candles that kept snuffing out despite the still air, and a dark-robed figure, always walking just behind them, never touching. Some even said they knew the ring's name in their dreams, but forgot it upon waking, leaving only a residue of guilt, like the stale scent of incense. It was as if the ring borrowed space in others' dreams to stay alive, to repeat a story even history refused to remember. Each night, curators recorded temperature drops around its case, always slightly colder than any other room. And on certain dates, like the autumn equinox, ring glowed faintly, not from external light, but from within the metal itself. A glow that didn't reflect, didn't warm, only penetrated the eye and stayed in the mind. No one could explain it. No one dared try. The museum's official narrative described the ring as an artifact, with no clear origin discovered among the ruins of an unrecorded monastery, buried beneath soil and roots, as if the structure itself begged to be forgotten. but whispered accounts among the staff told more. That the monastery was indeed abandoned due to war, but emptied all at once in a single night, with no signs of resistance or exodus. They spoke of melted candles forming intricate patterns on the stone floor, and symbols carved into the wall, symbols that matched no Christian tradition, etched with tools far too sharp for the age. No bones were found, no remaining manuscripts. Only a sealed room, long locked, which finally collapsed due to rain and time manned from that space. The ring was retrieved. Since then, researchers who handled it barehanded began to shift in subtle ways, some developing obsessions with subjects previously foreign to them, such as obscure liturgies, unknown languages, or the architecture of sacrificial rites. One professor disappeared for 2 days and returned with a notebook filled with symbols he could not translate. Yet he guarded it like treasure. The ring did not merely belong to history, seemed to carry history with it, spilling it slowly into anyone who dared draw near. When night falls and the museum is finally closed, the room where the ring is displayed is never truly dark. A faint glow, like the last flicker of a dying candle, seems to pulse from behind its protective glass. Security guards assigned to that corridor often avoid night shifts, and those who remain report hearing soft murmurs, prayers in an unplaceable tongue they cannot mimic. One guard, known for his rationalism and deep skepticism, was once seen standing still for nearly an hour before the ring, his eyes unblinking, lips slowly moving in sync with words only he could hear. After that night, he resigned, gave no explanation, and erased all his digital presence from the internet. No trace remained. An unpublished internal report noted that every visitor who stared at the ring for more than 15 seconds experienced sleep disturbances for 3 consecutive nights, recurring dreams of a fog-drenched monastery, stone stairs descending into cellars, and walls that seemed to breathe. A young curator once conducted a secret experiment. He recorded audio near the ring during the night, and upon playback there was a low frequency like a deep, rhythmic breath, as if the artifact were not inanimate but an entity, quietly awaiting its moment. So if one day you find yourself in that old museum wandering down the long hallway lined with forgotten artifacts of the world, and you come upon a ring that looks quite ordinary silver, small a bit, tarnished, don't be surprised if the air around you turns slightly colder. Don't stare too long at the ring. Don't try to read the inscription, even if your fingers ache to trace the strange shapes, because perhaps, just perhaps, the monastery the ring came from was never truly lost. Perhaps it merely sleeps, like old stories waiting to be told again, or like dreams not yet fully remembered. And if, that night, you wake with the sound of an old wooden door creaking in your mind, or the scent of incense lingering in your bedroom, or a soft whisper behind your locked window, remember, this is just a bedtime story about a ring, about a prayer that was never finished, about a monastery that holds more silence than history. Now, close your eyes slowly. Let that ancient world fade with the night. There's nothing to fear, not really. Sleep gently. Let the candlelight go out one by one.